Hi, everybody. Welcome to Resistance Live. It's Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. I'm glad you guys are all here. I don't know, very tired today. I feel like this news cycle has been just absolute madness since the debate, which was only 8 days ago. And we have a lot of ongoing multi-fronted developments. And it's very hard to kind of like stay grounded through all of this. I know we talked a lot yesterday about the importance of just like staying focused on getting out the vote. And I'm not going to tell you guys anything other than that. But we do have a lot to talk about because the fascists are not letting their foot off the gas. And we've also got to just like pay attention very closely right now to deadlines. So we're going to talk about early voting because there's a lot, like we're very, very close to early voting opening in many places. And it's really important to understand what the deadlines are where you live. Okay, first things first, today for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a white top with my black blazer over top. My hair is down. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty blonde-haired woman. I have very, very small gold hoops in today. I am in front of my plant and my oak cabinet and a pile of books over here. I've zoomed in on myself a little bit more today. So if I'm a little bit front and center more than I am normally, it's because I had to get a new laptop stand and I wanted you guys to all see me and not the back of my laptop. I am coming to you as always from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. Gratitude to the original custodians of the land on which I live and work. Okay, so yesterday for the second time, excuse me. That's never happened live on the air. Okay, let's try that again. Sorry, everybody. Yesterday, for the second time, Tammy Duckworth's IVF bill was blocked again in the Senate. Sorry. It needed 60 votes to get to the floor, and it only had 51. And I have to point out that this comes on the heels of Donald Trump claiming that he's all pro-IVF and the GOP claiming that they're all like pro-IVF and nobody wants to block IVF. When in reality, this is yet another moment where you have to watch what they do, not what they say. One of the things that has been really concerning at the moment about the messaging coming out of the GOP on abortion is that because they know it's a losing issue, they're trying to find ways to message around it without actually putting anything into place that follows through on that messaging. So I want everyone to kind of see what's happening here, all right? There's, even the New York Times doing its thing this morning said, IVF bill fails to pass despite Trump's endorsement of it. Trump did not endorse the IVF bill. He's claiming that he is in favor of IVF while simultaneously instructing the GOP to do everything possible to block it. And we have to be very cautious about this because for people who are less educated about what's happening politically than we are, there are gaps in people's awareness about what the positions really are of the GOP on abortion. They are 100% all in on a ban to IVF and a ban to birth control. And while there are, of course, like momentary outliers for that, like let's just say hypothetically Lisa Murkowski, the policy of the entire party at this point is to end IVF, end birth control, and have a nationwide abortion ban. If you have any doubts about this, you can go read about what's contained in Project 2025 on this exact point. They do not believe in anything other than pregnancy that occurs in a heterosexual marriage where there is no availability of divorce and where folks are forced to carry to term every pregnancy and IVF is not available. One of the reasons for that, because somebody said to me like on the Patreon feed this morning, doesn't this run contrary to kind of like what they're trying to do with replacement theory? Well, actually, no, because what they're seeking to do is to control how people who are pregnant carry forward with those pregnancies. All right. And they are not interested in giving anyone who might need IVF to become pregnant, which, by the way, includes people in gay marriages who may choose to use a surrogate, people who are in lesbian marriages who may choose to use a sperm donor, the whole swath of reproductive technologies that has allowed alternative families, including families with single mothers by choice, to become a part of the fabric of our society, the whole swath of reproductive technologies that has allowed that is on the chopping block. And people truly have to be very thoughtful about the disinformation that is coming out of the GOP right now in terms of messaging, all right? Because Donald Trump may be out there posting things like he believes in an exception for rape and incest, when the reality is that Project 2025 says the exact opposite of that. And he is on board with Project 2025 no matter what he says. So I want everybody to really grasp that yesterday was another watershed moment, okay? If they believed in protecting IVF, they could have brought that bill to the floor and passed it. And instead, they stood in the way of its passage. And they did it intentionally. And now John Thune is out there this morning saying, oh, well, we have a replacement bill that Democrats could vote on, and that replacement bill does not do what they claim it is doing. So everyone needs to be very mindful of the fact that there's an enormous amount of propaganda floating around right now on this and many other issues, right? And if you're not aware of the way in which this is all actually playing out in real time on the Hill at the moment, you might actually fall for that. So keep this all in mind in the context of how you discuss the issue of reproductive freedom and reproductive justice when you are out knocking doors, text banking, phone banking, all of that other good stuff. Make sure that you are up to speed on how they are not walking the talk, all right? Because we don't want anyone to fall for this. And I'm going to remind you all that we've had 2 reports in the last 48 hours of women dying because they needed abortion care and could not access it where they live. The GOP has blood on its hands. And we need to make sure that every voter heading into November remembers that. All right. Okay. I do want to mention a couple of other things right now related to the 2024 election, and that is key Senate races. So I get asked this question at least once a week right now on the Patreon feed. And I have historically told all of you the races that are the most critical here. But I'm going to raise one thing here that we have not yet discussed in great detail, which is that one of the side effects of what's happening in the horrific racist lies about Springfield, Ohio, is that donations to Sherrod Brown's Trump-endorsed opponent have gone through the roof. And one of the features of why this lie is continuing to be perpetrated is that blame is being attached to Sherrod Brown for this alleged completely xenophobic false story about Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. At the moment, I am very concerned about Sherrod Brown's seat. I'm also very concerned about Jon Tester. And I have to say that while ordinarily, as you all know on this broadcast, I'm going to tell you all again, just so nobody mistakes me. Donate to Colin Allred. Donate to Debbie Murcassel-Powell. Make sure you donate to Elise Slotkin. Make sure that you are donating to Angela Brooks, who desperately needs to win her Senate race in Maryland against Larry Hogan. Okay. Make sure that you are donating to as well, Jon Tester and Sherrod Brown. And ordinarily I come on here and I tell you, please make sure you're donating to marginalized candidates first, because those folks historically, due to pay inequity, tend to get much lower donations than white men. We need Sherrod Brown and Jon Tester to keep their seats, though. And so I want everyone who can focus on Ohio and Montana to also do that, all right? I am really, really worried about the blowback right now to Sherrod Brown's campaign, which was already a toss-up as a result of this horrific set of lies that are being told about Springfield, Ohio. So please, please, be very, very thoughtful about where you're directing your money and your time. Sherrod Brown needs to win. He needs to win. And I just very much want folks to be very careful about how you're directing your money. I'm going to remind you of something else. Okay. And I feel like I have to say this over and over and over again. All right. Do not donate through text messages that come into your phone. Okay. So many of those are from super PACs, and those PACs are taking money off the top or not routing it to places that they are saying they're going to route it to. Donate directly to candidates through their online campaign websites. Please, please. You want your money to go where you know it needs to go. All right. It's critically important that you are thoughtful about this. All right. As I mentioned, early voting starts very soon. Early voting, by the way, we talked about North Carolina a lot in the last week and a half. Early voting is back on in North Carolina. It starts October 11th. Like, just so everybody is aware, okay? That's 3 weeks from now. we are in voting season for the 2024 election. And we've got other early voting dates starting like very soon, okay? One of the things I want to remind everybody of is that you want to vote as early as you possibly can. Why? Well, because the first thing that it does is it signals to people who are doing mobilization work that they don't need to knock your door, okay? They don't need to call you. They don't need to text bank you. That means they are not wasting their time on people who have already voted. All right. The earlier that you vote, the more effective the turnout resources will be on targeting people who have not yet voted. All right. So please make sure you vote as early as you can. But also, I want to remind everybody that because we know that they are going to throw a mountain of shenanigans at the election results, we were already having signals of this from Donald Trump and others in the last 48 hours. All right. We know that they are going to claim that any vote that is counted after November 5th itself is somehow fraudulent. Lies. This is all lies. It's all lies, okay? Lots of elections take days to count, okay? Just because they're being counted after the election date itself does not mean those votes are fraudulent, okay? But that said, the earlier that you vote, the earlier your votes, there are some states for which this is an exception, but the earlier that you vote, the earlier your vote will be counted. And that means that the election results will be called as early as possible. So this is a year where you desperately need to vote early. Early voting in Virginia starts on September 20th. That's 2 days from now. Okay. Please vote as early as possible in your state. Google where your state what the deadline is in your state and make sure that you vote as early as possible. For those who are wondering how they know that you have voted, they don't know who you voted for, okay? But one of the things that the software that is used by door knockers tells them is whether or not your vote has been counted. Because if your vote has been counted, you're not going to be in that database anymore for door knocking, all right? Again, this is a really key, important strategic feature of making sure that the mobilization work that all of us are doing are targeted to people who actually still need to vote. Otherwise, we're wasting people's time and energy. All right. Please, 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 I'm going to beg you, vote as early as possible. You all know we had a special election. It's actually today, but there is a special election in my district because our representative died. And I was the first person in line on the first day of voting for the special. Okay. And I had to drive to 20 minutes into a neighboring town to be able to vote that early. But it matters. It matters to do that. Okay. Please plan your vote, know how you're going to vote, and vote as early as you possibly can. And in certain states that are very big on voter protection, like California, you will know when if you vote by mail, your ballot has been received, your ballot has been counted. You can rest assured then that your work is done and you can direct everything else to mobilizing everybody who hasn't voted. All right. So really, really critical, really, really important. Vote as early as you possibly can. Whether you are voting by mail or you have early voting available in your state, do it as soon as possible. All right. The other thing I'm just going to remind you of is that we have serious voter suppression efforts underway in many states where they have limited the number of polling places that are available on election day. So one of the things that you need to do in order to make sure that everybody who wants to vote actually has access to the vote is to vote as early as possible so that those limited polling places are as empty as possible on election day itself. Now, I'm going to remind everybody, when you vote, whenever you vote, please make sure that you know your voter protection hotlines. Okay. This is also really important if you know people who are going to vote in person on election day. Make sure that they know what the voter protection hotlines are. And remember that if you are in line when the polls close, you have a right to vote. You cannot be turned away if you are waiting in line. All right. But we have a lot of work to do collectively to make sure that we are protecting the right to vote for as many people as possible. And that includes by voting as early as you possibly can. Okay. All right. Speaking of which, I'm just going to do a quick shout out here because I had a conversation with another mobilizer here where I live. Today is, in fact, the special election in the New Jersey 10th. That includes Newark. It happens to include the area that I live in. It includes various other areas in northern New Jersey. If you live in the New Jersey 10th, please vote today and vote for McIver because that's who I voted for. And she's amazing. Former public school administrator, former chair of the Newark City Council. She's a rising star in the Democratic Party. Please go vote. She's also our nom in November. You're going to have to vote for her again, but go vote. Okay. Go vote. We're unrepresented right now. Okay. We had some very big news this morning and yesterday about 111 former Republican administration officials endorsing Kamala Harris for president. Again, we are seeing like a huge tent being built here in terms of endorsements for the Harris-Walz ticket. Now, I have to say one thing here, because there are a couple of like naysayers out there who are like, I'm very uncomfortable with the fact that Dick Cheney has been given forgiveness by the Democratic Party. Okay. I just have to tell everybody that that is not what is happening. Okay. Just because a former Republican official or an enormous group of former Republican administration officials endorses Kamala Harris does not mean that the rest of us agree with their policies or agree with what they did historically, or in some instances agree with their war crimes. We will take every endorsement that we can get right now. Does it mean that like those people are being given grace for what they've done historically? No. It just simply means that they have made an endorsement. Okay. So I don't want anybody to be falling for the idea that somehow the Democrats are as bad as Republicans if Republicans are endorsing the Harris-Walz ticket. That's nonsense. It's also totally illogical, right? Like, we're not seeing anybody like on the Democratic side going like, yay, Dick Cheney. You know, nobody's doing that. Nobody's there like, oh yeah, all those historic war crimes are instantly forgiven. Nobody's doing that. Okay. So please be very thoughtful about this as well. All right. There's a lot of folks out there who are, and including bots and trolls and bad actors, who want to divide the Democratic Party and claim that somehow the Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans because of X person making an endorsement. Or, by the way, because Chuck Schumer voted against the IVF bill, which, by the way, I'm just going to tell all of you was a procedural move that will allow him to bring the bill to the floor again. He is very pro IVF protection, but he voted against the bill so that he can bring it to the floor for a third time if he thinks he's got the votes. Okay. That's a part of the Senate rules. So please do not fall for the propaganda. All right. Like, Democrats are in array, and that doesn't mean that they're lining up behind Dick Cheney. Okay. It also doesn't mean that Chuck Schumer did anything wrong yesterday. All right. Lots of folks have asked me to talk about this breaking story about Justice Roberts on immunity. And I haven't talked about it yet because I actually have found the reporting to be deeply misleading. Essentially, let me just summarize this. Several news outlets reported on the fact that Chief Justice Roberts, when the immunity decision arrived on certiorari to the Supreme Court, circulated a memo saying that he thought the lower court's decision was irrational and that in short order, some form of presidential immunity should be granted to Trump. Okay. And that was sent around in the form of a case memo. So I just want to make something really clear here. Okay. Case memos are a part of a standard operating procedure inside the Supreme Court. And folks have been terming this as like, Chief Justice Roberts intervened. He did not intervene. That's actually like a complete misunderstanding of the way in which cases move through the Supreme Court once they arrive there. All right. He wrote a memo sharing his opinion about what he thought should take place in the results of the case. Again, very usual. And I have news for anybody who thinks that Chief Justice Roberts somehow was going to turn into a liberal. That is not something that anybody with a rational brain and a law degree ever actually expected was going to take place. So the reason why I haven't mentioned it is because I actually sort of think the story is a nothing burger. This is not a situation where he tried to like stick his thumb on the scales of justice, because he can't, right? Like, every single justice on the court has the right to decide how they're going to decide and write an opinion. So I just don't, I don't know why you wouldn't already be disappointed in Justice Roberts, but I also don't know why anybody would think this story is somehow scandalous. So, take that for what it's worth. All right. Okay. Other breaking legal news. Yesterday, Trump's team asked for a 30-day extension in the deadline to file a brief before the 11th Circuit on the dismissal by Eileen Cannon of the classified documents case. Personally, I think this is garbage. The original brief was due in October. Now they're asking for it to be due, I think, like right before the election itself. It was due like in the first week of October. I think it should be denied, but I'm not going to tell any of you that I think that a 30-day extension is not going to be granted by the 11th Circuit either. There are plenty of reasons for them not to grant it, but also requests for extensions are moderately granted by appellate courts. And so no one should be surprised if that's the case as well here. All right. Is it going to make that much of a difference to the election? Probably not, because the case was not likely to be decided in advance of the election anyhow. All right. But do I think that we're going to see, how shall I put it? A really outrageous brief from the Trump team? Yes. We already know that amicus briefs have been filed asking for Cannon to be replaced. It is a very incendiary matter that's currently before the 11th Circuit, and they would have every reason to say, sorry, you've got to turn in your brief on the current deadline, and that's that. All right. I just don't, I just have to say, though, that, I don't think one way or another this is going to influence the election, because he's not going to be tried in advance of the election in this case. The only issue is whether or not Eileen Cannon's going to be replaced. And, assuming that we defeat him in November, all bets are going to be off on this anyhow, because he's not going to have any reason to avoid any of this. And I do think, by the way, they're going to reinstitute the case regardless. Okay. Couple of other things, just briefly. We spent some time yesterday on the case involving Sean Combs. Late yesterday afternoon, he was denied bail. I am not surprised by this. I told you all yesterday about the nature of the indictment and that it was a very rough read. Also mentioned the fact that there were 2 automatic rifles found in his bedroom, that he had already tried to flee the country once. Even though his bail package was like, $50 million, and his house was up for collateral, and his mother's house and his entire family had surrendered their passports, and it was not enough, right? So he's being held without bail, which means he's going to be incarcerated until he goes to trial. Now, I do have to say one thing here, which some of you are not going to like. As soon as I discussed this yesterday on Threads, there were all sorts of people that were like, now do Trump, right? So I have to point something out about bail evaluations in criminal court, okay? Diddy is accused of at least a 15-year pattern of drugging and forcing women under his control into gang rape situations. Sometimes that went on for days. Sorry, I should have given everyone a trigger warning. He is accused of extreme physical violence against many of these women. And he's also accused of trafficking multiple women and male prostitutes across state lines on his private plane for purposes of these gang rapes like scenarios. All right. This is an extremely violent predator. Okay. And while we can have lots of discussions about the nature of the harm that Donald Trump has done to America and the nature of the harm that he has done to democracy and the lack of accountability for January 6th, although that case is, going to go to trial. I want everybody to understand that the considerations for bail are very different in the context of the kinds of allegations that have been made against Sean Combs versus the kind of allegations that have been made against Donald Trump. All right. Because the other thing I'm going to tell you is that when they arrested Diddy in New York City on Monday night, he had drugs in his hotel room. Not the best thing to do if you know you're about to be arrested, but there we are. Okay. And there seems to be a very serious consideration by this judge of an ongoing threat. All right. Look, I'm not going to debate with all of you, like the fact that Trump is an adjudicated rapist. That's true. Okay. But you do have to be really grounded in the facts of each case as they are evaluated by a judge when it comes to bail or release conditions. Okay. Trump was not arrested with 2 serial number scratched out automatic guns in his bedroom that witnesses had reported he had threatened them with, right? This is not a scenario where literally hundreds of people were victimized over the course of 15 years in some of the worst possible kinds of sexual assault you could imagine. Literally drugged to the point of dehydration, sometimes drugged with date rape drugs, recorded on video, okay? Very different scenario from the standpoint of violence and immediate threats. All right. And as much as folks, would very much like Trump to be incarcerated, and I understand why, right? I get that. I also want people to understand from the standpoint of considerations about incarceration and release that the judge is facing down a very different set of facts when it comes to Sean Combs than when it comes to Donald Trump. And I know there are lots of people who are screaming for blood, right? who just desperately want Trump to be off the national stage so that they don't have to hear from him again. I get it. And also, like, please understand that the evaluation of bail and release conditions is something that we want to be done on a case-by-case basis in a very measured way. Why? Because we don't want people who are actually not like, and I'm not saying this is Trump, we don't want people who are not a direct, violent, immediate threat to their communities with actual attempts to flee the country walking around, right? So please understand, okay, that as much as everybody, not everybody, but a lot of us want to see Trump like stuck in prison for the rest of his life, due process considerations and the evaluation of bail on a case-by-case basis is a part of what is supposed to make our criminal justice system more fair, all right? Like, this is Epstein level stuff, all right? And while Donald Trump rode on Epstein's plane, Donald Trump never flew like, hundreds of girls to a private island to engage in all sorts of forms of sexual assault. Do we know that he might have participated in that? Possibly. But was he the engineer behind it, a la Sean Combs, a la Jeffrey Epstein? No. And there's a difference, okay? So, please, let's just everybody needs to take a breath, because one of the things that happens sometimes in these instances is that people get bloodthirsty. And you have to understand that our justice system cannot be tossed out the window, let alone due process considerations tossed out the window, because everybody is profoundly sick of Donald Trump and understands that he engineered an insurrection, okay? We do not treat people who have engaged in sex trafficking, hundreds of people, and massive forms of gang rape on videotape the same as we treat somebody who is accused of sexual assaulting a person in a department store dressing room. And, we can all have discussions about how much we love E. Jean Carroll and how horrific that particular event was, let alone the alleged assault on Donald Trump's first wife, okay? But please understand the magnitude is one of the things that comes into play here when bail is addressed, all right? And frankly, I just have to be very, 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 very honest with you here, okay? Sean Combs, if all these allegations are true, is one of the worst predators that this nation has ever seen. And, the harm that he has done to hundreds and hundreds of people, and by extension, all their loved ones, right, is of a magnitude that, other than Epstein, I can't think of anybody else who's up there except maybe Harvey Weinstein, except he was only doing it himself, right? In this instance, Sean Combs actually paid people to be involved in gang rapes. So, you have to kind of have some measure of evaluating the circumstances when you approach things like this, okay? All right, final point, because I want to end on a good note. Kamala Harris gave an incredible interview yesterday before the National Association of Black Journalists. You should go find it. I watched most of it, and I will just tell you that, man, in addition to the fact that her empathy is on full display in the context of what's been happening in Springfield, Ohio, and elsewhere, on top of the fact that she's just an incredibly kind leader. I also have to say that there's the whole interview was just full of great advice. How do you deal with people who hate you? How do you deal with people who believe that you're not qualified? All of the things that she was saying in there are things that just reminded me, and probably will remind all of you, about all the reasons why she should be the president of the United States. And we need a lot more focus on that. We need a lot more focus on that. All right. So go find that interview. It's wonderful. Also, final thing I wanted to mention is that tomorrow night, Oprah Winfrey is hosting a call that is designed to unite all of the groups that previously held previously held Zoom calls for various identity groups once the Harris nomination was announced. You can Google it. I'm already signed up for it. I'm going to tune in and listen to it. But a lot of the organizational calls that we were already on, including one with Black women, which launched the whole thing, are involved in this call tomorrow night with Oprah Winfrey. Please check it out if you have the time to do that. But most importantly today, I just want to reemphasize to everyone, please Google when early voting starts where you live. Please. Like, we've really got to be on top of it. It's incredibly important that, you know where to vote early, and that you plan to vote early, and you plan to mobilize everybody that you know to vote early. Please get on it. Okay. Lots of love to everyone. Please don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe here. If this broadcast is meaningful to you, subscribing here on the YouTube channel is free. Okay. But you can also click join to become a paid YouTube member if you would like to do that. Or if you want to ask me questions, you can become a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $5 a month. That's less than 20 cents a broadcast. And you get to ask me questions for 3 hours before every broadcast. And as long as they're not duplicative and I have enough time, I will answer them on the air. If not, I will answer them in writing. All right. So I'm so grateful to our Patreon subscribers. You help to keep this broadcast afloat. You help me to pay my team behind the scenes that handles all the tech. Please don't forget about them. We have an incredibly diverse and incredible team that works here with me, and it makes all of the magic happen. And those folks deserve to be paid. So please become a paid subscriber if this is meaningful to you. I will be here tomorrow. I will be here on Friday at regular time. Reminder to please go to mobilize.us and sign up to do something today to get out the vote for a candidate that you care about where you live. All right. Lots of love, everyone. And I will catch you all here tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye.